Outside a fast food diner, a struggling nursing student, juggling school, night shifts, and caring for her sick mother, witnesses a man collapse on the sidewalk. Despite judgment and doubt, she performs CPR and saves his life. What she doesn't know is that he's a billionaire in the medical industry. Just as her own world begins to fall apart, he returns and changes her life forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The night was cold, but Harlem never really slept. The streets still pulsed with the soft rhythm of car engines, distant music bleeding through cracked windows, and the occasional cackle of conversation drifting up from the bodega down the block. It was past midnight, and the city had thinned but not emptied. Alia James sat alone on the fifth-floor fire escape of her building, hoodie drawn tight against the autumn wind. She clutched a crumpled $20 bill in one hand, rubbing it between her fingers like it might tell her what to do. That 20 was supposed to be a celebration. Alia had just passed her CPR certification exam, top of her class. She should have been smiling, texting her classmates, maybe even going out for drinks like the others planned. But she couldn't get herself to join. Because that $20 was also her bus fare for the week, her mom's insulin pickup next Thursday, 3 frozen dinners if she caught the right sale at the corner store. A distant siren howled, then faded into the background hum of the city. She looked out over the street, past the chipped railings, to where the old church sign flickered across the road. Faith is walking in the dark when the light won't come on. A bitter smile tugged at her lips. Easy for them to say, she muttered. Inside the apartment, the muffled sound of her mother coughing broke the silence. Alia winced. That cough had been getting worse. She was already 2 weeks late refilling the prescription. Medicaid covered part of it, but the copay still punched harder than it should. Her phone buzzed in her lap, a text from her classmate Maya. "We're heading to Rico's. Come celebrate, girl. You earned it." Alia stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard, then retreated. She couldn't bring herself to lie and say she had plans, but she couldn't say the truth either. "I can't afford joy tonight." Instead, she shoved the phone back in her hoodie pocket and pulled her knees close, the weight of everything pressed down like a second skin. School, work, caregiver, student loans waiting to detonate the moment she graduated. The double shifts at Rodriguez Market, where she stocked shelves until her fingers went numb. The night she sat in class, trying to stay awake after changing her mom's bedding at 3 a.m., because the blood sugar crash had come without warning again. She had been telling herself that nursing was the way out, that if she just held on, just pushed through one more semester, then everything would change. But lately she wasn't so sure. What if this was it? What if all her hard work led right back to where she started, grinding just to survive? What if being a nurse wasn't a ladder out of poverty, but just another rung on the same damn staircase? She blinked hard. No tears. Not tonight. The wind picked up, rattling the metal beneath her. She looked down at the bill in her hand again. $20. That was all. But it was something. She stood, joints stiff from the cold, and climbed back inside the apartment through the window. Her mom was asleep on the couch, surrounded by the familiar smells of ointments and plastic containers. Alia tiptoed to the kitchen, opened the fridge. A single bottle of water. 1 takeout box with half a burrito. Expired yogurt. The hunger gnawed at her, but she closed the door. Instead, she pinned the 20 to the inside of the cupboard door with a magnet shaped like a nurse's hat. She'd find a way to make it stretch. She always did. Then she sat down at the small table, the CPR certification papers still spread out beneath the flickering overhead light. Alia traced the printed letters with her finger. Certified. It wasn't much, but it meant something. She didn't know yet that tomorrow everything would fall apart, or that before the week was over, she'd meet a man whose life would hang by the thread of her training, and whose gratitude would change her future forever. Tonight, she had $20, a skill that could save a life, and a weary heart that still beat with something like hope. And sometimes that was enough to carry you through the dark. Fade to black. It was supposed to be a 5-minute walk to grab milk. Nothing more. The kind of errand you squeeze in between responsibilities: school, work, caretaking. One more tiny box to check off before the night ends. Aaliyah wrapped her hoodie tighter and stepped into the hum of Harlem's evening noise, her shoes slapping the damp concrete. Her breath fogged in the cold, streetlights casting broken halos on the sidewalk. The city was always louder near Marley's diner, laughter spilling from the windows, the sizzle of grease and conversation in the air. She passed it without looking twice, eyes down, focused on the errand. Then she heard it. A thud, heavy, final, followed by glass shattering, a chair screeching backward, a woman's sharp gasp. She stopped cold. Across the street, just outside the neon glow of the diner's windows, a man had collapsed. Mid-50s, pale, expensive overcoat sprawled open like wings on the pavement. His chest didn't rise. His lips purple. His hands clawed at nothing. People stood there, watching, frozen. A server held the door open but didn't step forward. A teen pulled out his phone, already filming. Aaliyah's pulse spiked. She could feel it hammering in her neck. "Somebody call 911, someone shouted. She didn't remember moving her legs. One second she was on the curb, the next she was kneeling beside the man, her knees soaking up the cold from the concrete. She could hear voices rising, blending into static, doubt, confusion, fear. Someone muttered behind her, "She's touching him?" Another voice, sharper, "Is she even trained?" Aaliyah didn't flinch. Her hands moved on their own, measured, steady. She tilted his head back, swept his mouth. No obstruction, no breath. "He's not breathing," she said, loud enough to silence the murmurs. She interlocked her fingers, placed her palms at the center of his chest, and began compressions. 1, 2, 3. The world narrowed. She didn't see the crowd, didn't hear their whispers. All she saw was the man beneath her, the cold weight of him, the thud of her palms hitting his sternum. This was what she trained for. This was what all those hours in class were supposed to mean. 15 compressions, 2 breaths. His chest barely lifted, no response. Again. Her arms burned, her knees ached, sweat gathered at her temples despite the cold. He was slipping and she was the only thing tethering him to the world. "Back up," someone barked. A hand touched her shoulder. She shrugged it off. "I'm certified," she snapped. "He's not dead unless I say so." The air grew still. For a moment, even the city seemed to hold its breath. She kept going. Compressions, breaths, count, reposition, don't stop. A minute passed. Then 2. She didn't know anymore. Then, under her fingers, a twitch. A heartbeat. She stopped, leaning close, breath held. His chest rose, shallow, then again. He gasped, a ragged inhale like life slamming its way back in. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. They locked on hers. "You," he rasped. "You saved me." The sirens wailed in the distance, closer, closer. She felt herself sag, just for a second, as the paramedics rushed in, pulling her gently aside. They swarmed him, voices clipped and efficient, wires and masks and monitors appearing like magic. She watched them lift him onto the stretcher, oxygen mask pressed to his face, his eyes never leaving hers until the ambulance doors shut with a hollow thud. The crowd erupted. A few people clapped. A woman said, "That girl's a hero." A man gave her a nod of respect. Phones angled toward her. Someone asked for her name. Aaliyah didn't answer. She stood there, the cold returning to her skin, her breath shaky. The moment was over. The man would live. But as she turned away, wiping her hands on her jeans, the celebration felt distant, like a party thrown in someone else's honor. Her heart wasn't light. Her shoulders didn't lift. Instead, something in her gut twisted, low and uneasy, like a thread had just been pulled in the fabric of her life, and soon everything might unravel. She didn't know how, not yet. But as she walked back through the city night, her shoes crunching broken glass and her hands still smelling faintly of antiseptic, she knew one thing for sure. She had saved a man's life, and somehow it was about to change hers. The morning light slanted through the cracked blinds in Elia's bedroom like an interrogation lamp. Harsh, uninvited, revealing everything she wished it wouldn't. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. She hadn't slept, not really. The image of the man's pale face, the feel of his ribs compressing beneath her palms, his whisper, "You saved me," all replayed in an endless loop. But underneath the lingering adrenaline was something heavier, a pit in her stomach she couldn't explain. The first blow came at 7:42 a.m., with the sound of a rumbling engine and a chain clinking against metal. She froze mid-step in the kitchen, her coffee cup trembling in her hand. She crossed to the window, parted the blinds, and her heart dropped straight through her feet. Her car, her 2004 Nissan Altima, her only way to get to work and to class. It was being hauled onto a flatbed tow truck like roadkill. "No, no, no," she muttered, grabbing her hoodie, still barefoot, as she tore down 5 flights of stairs, breath heaving, legs barely holding. "Wait!" she yelled as she burst through the front door. The driver, mid-40s, chewing gum like it owed him money, looked at her with practiced indifference. "Miss James?" he asked, clipboard already out. "Yes, that's my car. There has to be a mistake. I paid the insurance last week. Partial, but I paid." "Partial don't count anymore," he said with a shrug. "Your policy was marked lapsed at midnight. Orders are to tow it in, uninsured vehicle parked on city property." "Just give me a day. He cut her off. "Lady, I just drive the truck." The Altima was gone before she could even grab her wallet. She stood on the sidewalk in her socks, watching the last piece of her mobility disappear around the corner. By the time she trudged back upstairs, her mother was awake, sitting on the edge of the couch, her hands curled around a mug of tea like it was her only anchor. "I heard," her mother said gently. "You okay?" "No," Aaliyah replied. "Not even a little." She didn't get to sit down, because that's when the second blow hit. A dull, mechanical ding from her phone. Email from the registrar's office. Subject: urgentness is couched. Your admission account will be numb fingers. Dear Ms. James, your tuition balance remains unpaid. Despite previous warnings, your enrollment will be terminated if payment is not received by Friday. You will be withdrawn from the current semester and barred from clinical rotations. Her vision blurred, her ears buzzed. She had paid. She knew she had paid. $500.00 2 weeks ago. She had the receipt. Her thumb scrolled faster, looking for answers. Attached was a ledger summary. Everything she'd paid had vanished. And just as the weight of that hit her chest like a bag of bricks, a loud knock slammed into the door. She turned the knob with hands that were now trembling. It was Mrs. Hartwell, building manager, gray bun, clipboard, always wore her smile like a threat. "Miss James," she said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. "I've given you as much leeway as I could, but you're officially 2 months behind. I'm required to deliver this." She handed over a yellow envelope with a stamp that said, "Notice to vacate." "You have 14 days. Elia stared at her like she didn't understand English. "No. That's wrong. I gave you cash last month." Mrs. Hartwell tilted her head. "You gave someone cash. But there's no record of it. I handed it to Marcus in the office." Mrs. Hartwell's lips pursed. "Marcus no longer works for us. He was let go for discrepancies in tenant payments. I'm sorry." Aaliyah closed the door slowly, as if shutting out reality. 3 hits, in under an hour, no car, no school, no home. She dropped the envelope on the floor, leaned her back against the door, and slid down until her knees were up to her chest. She wanted to scream, but all that came out was a ragged breath. "I saved someone's life last night," she whispered into the quiet, "and today mine is falling apart." Her mother came to sit beside her, placed a warm hand over hers. "I know it hurts," her mother said softly. "I know it doesn't make sense, but you did the right thing." Ahili didn't answer, because she wasn't sure it was the right thing anymore. Later that afternoon, still numb, she forced herself to go to the registrar's office in person. The woman behind the plexiglass smiled with professional detachment. "Your account is in delinquent status, Miss James. I paid $500. It should have cleared 2 weeks ago." She tapped a few keys. "There's no record of that payment." Aaliyah dug into her bag, pulled out the receipt, slammed it on the desk. "There is now." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Hold on." She disappeared into the back. A few minutes passed, then a different woman emerged. Younger, smarter eyes. ID badge read Deirdre Morales, assistant bursar. She took the paper, scanned it, checked something on her tablet. Her brow furrowed. This payment was entered into the system. Then it was manually deleted. Accessed by admin ID 617. Her voice trailed. "What?" Aaliyah asked. Deirdre hesitated, lowered her voice. "That ID belongs to Cedric Vaughn, housing director." The words didn't land right. Where would the housing director be adjusting my tuition file? Deirdre looked troubled. "That's not normal. Let me pull some logs. Do you have a moment?" Aaliyah sat down. Legs shaking again. Her heart was no longer racing. It was burning. Cedric Vaughn, the smug man with the cheap cologne who ran student housing like a used car lot, always dismissive, always watching. He'd made comments before. "You sure you can afford to be here? This isn't charity housing, you know." She wanted students like her gone, and now she was beginning to understand just how far he might have gone to make that happen. The final hit wasn't physical. It wasn't a letter. It was knowledge. Someone wasn't just letting her fall. Someone was cutting the ropes. And Aaliyah James wasn't going to let them get away with it. The call came just past noon, just as Aaliyah was closing the door behind her after a gut-wrenching meeting with student affairs. She hadn't eaten, hadn't even cried yet. Her limbs moved on autopilot, exhaustion painted in the droop of her shoulders, the tension in her jaw. She thought it was a spam number at first, that gut instinct that said, "Ignore it." But something made her answer. "Miss James?" a woman's voice said, smooth, clipped, professional. "Yes?" Aaliyah's tone was cautious. "My name is Simone Carter. I'm calling on behalf of Vanguard Holdings. Mr. Elijah Broderick has requested a meeting with you." She blinked. "Who?" "Elijah Broderick," Simone repeated, as if the name should register. "CEO of Vanguard. He believes you saved his life." Aaliyah's chest froze. The man outside Marley's diner. The one she'd kept alive until the paramedics came. That was almost 2 days ago, and no one, no police, no hospital, had ever followed up. But now this woman, in this calm and chillingly polished voice, was inviting her into the orbit of someone who, if the name was real, had skyscrapers under his belt. "I don't understand. What does he want with me?" "Miss James, this isn't a solicitation or a prank. Mr. Broderick is requesting a brief meeting. His assistant will send a car to bring you to our Manhattan office. The address is on Park Avenue, top floor." That alone told her everything. Rich people didn't live in the same verticals as the rest of the world. Still, the walls of her instinct went up. "Can I bring someone with me?" "Of course," Simone replied, almost amused. "We expected you might." By 3 p.m., Aaliyah and her roommate, Mariah, were in the back seat of a black Lincoln Navigator with tinted windows and seats that smelled like leather and lemon oil. Mariah kept looking around, like they were headed to a movie premiere. "Girl, this is the kind of ride you see in music videos," she whispered. "Are you sure this isn't a scam?" "I don't know what it is," Aaliyah muttered, watching the skyline rise through the window. "But I'm going to find out." The building was an obsidian monolith rising over Park Avenue, 35 stories of steel, glass, and money. The lobby was marble, the elevators were silent, and the receptionist who greeted them smiled without showing teeth. Simone Carter met them on the top floor, waiting just as her voice had sounded. Sharp suit, sleek hair, eyes that missed nothing. "Miss James," she said, extending a hand. "It's a pleasure." Aaliyah shook it cautiously. "Likewise, I guess." Simone nodded to Mariah. Feel free to join. This won't take long. The conference room was all glass and chrome, with a view of the city that made everything else seem small. A tray of bottled water and cut fruit sat untouched in the corner. Simone gestured for them to sit. "I imagine you have questions," she began. "I've got a few," Aaliyah said, folding her arms, "starting with why someone who could afford this," she gestured around, "would even remember someone like me." Simone gave the faintest of smiles. "That's fair, but you should know. Elijah Broderick was once a field medic. Afghanistan. He saved a lot of lives. Lost a few, too. But the war left him with heart damage. He's had arrhythmia for years, keeps a biometric watch linked to his medical profile." She pulled up a tablet, tapped a few times, and turned it to face Aaliyah. A grainy video played. Aaliyah, outside Marley's, hands pressed to a man's chest, calling out for someone to dial 911. It had gone viral on TikTok. 60,000 views. "I didn't even know someone was filming," she whispered. "Neither did he," Simone said. "But the watch logged the time of his cardiac event." The hospital cross-referenced the footage. The face in the video matched what Elijah remembered when he came to. "You saved him, Miss James. He wants to thank you properly." Aaliyah shifted, suspicious. "People don't usually thank someone by calling them to a skyscraper." "You're right," Simone said. "They don't. But Aaliyah isn't most people." She handed over a folder. Inside was a stack of documents. A letter from East River Community College confirming her balance was paid in full, a credit report showing zero debt, even her delinquent utility bill, gone. "What the hell is this?" Mariah breathed. Aaliyah couldn't finish. Simone continued. "Your tuition, your car insurance, your credit card debt, cleared in full. You'll also find this." She slid over a slim keycard envelope. "A fully furnished studio apartment in Brooklyn, 12 months paid in advance, utilities covered, walkable to Columbia University." Aaliyah blinked. "Columbia?" Elijah pulled some strings. "You've been granted a transfer admission to finish your nursing degree there, full scholarship, books and fees included." Aaliyah sat perfectly still, unable to breathe. Her throat worked, but nothing came out. "And finally," Simone said with that same careful tone, "Elijah is launching a new initiative, the Broderick Foundation for Medical Equity. It's designed to provide scholarships and support for underrepresented students in healthcare, especially those with lived experience. He wants you to help build it. You'd serve as a student coordinator this year, and next year, post-graduation, come on full-time." "While me," she whispered. "Because you didn't walk away," Simone said simply. "Because you showed the kind of courage that can't be taught. Because Elijah Broderick believes in repaying grace with grace." A long silence settled over the room like falling snow. Aaliyah finally looked up, her voice barely above a breath. "You said he remembered me," Simone smiled. "He remembers everything." She slid a final envelope across the table. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Aaliyah, when my heart stopped, the world kept moving. But you didn't. You stayed. You fought. You gave me back my breath, and I want to give you the same. I know what it's like to believe the world only takes, but sometimes, if we're lucky, it gives back. Let this be your moment. Let this be your breath." Elijah Broderick. Aaliyah's hands trembled as she folded the letter back. Mariah was crying beside her. Simone stood. "The choice is yours. Everything you've seen today is yours, if you want it." Aaliyah looked out at the city, then at the weightless folder in her lap, then down at her own scarred, steady hands. The same hands that brought a stranger back from the brink. For the first time in a long time she felt her lungs expand, like maybe, just maybe, she could breathe too. 6 months later. The ballroom at the Midtown Civic Center was nothing like the concrete classrooms where Aaliyah James had once sat sleepless, worn thin by responsibility and doubt. No, this space shimmered under warm lights, the air humming with the sound of possibility, silverware clinking against porcelain, soft jazz weaving between conversations, and the rustle of elegant gowns and tailored suits. And yet, even amid the grandeur of the gala, Aaliyah felt no distance from the girl she had been 6 months ago. The girl who'd knelt on cold asphalt with nothing but her hands and hope. Tonight she wore a simple navy fuel dress, professional, sharp, and earned. Around her neck hung a small silver pin engraved with the emblem of the Broderick Foundation for Medical Equity. It wasn't for show, it was a symbol of survival, of service, of transformation. 6 months ago she'd been drowning. Now she stood at the podium, the keynote speaker before a crowd that included legislators, donors, educators, and community leaders, but most importantly, it included students. Young, tired, determined souls who looked at her the way she used to look at anyone who had made it. She took a breath, her fingers lightly touching the side of the podium, steadying herself not from nerves but from the weight of memory. "I want to thank you all for being here," she began, voice clear and even. "I know some of you came tonight because you believe in policy or progress or data. But I came because I believe in people." A ripple of silence moved through the room. 6 months ago, I was on the edge of quitting. My mother was sick, my school was threatening to drop me. I was one eviction notice away from the streets. And then she paused, her eyes lifting to the front row, where Simone sat, dabbing at the corner of her eye with a linen napkin. "I did what I was trained to do. I saved a life." She let the words breathe, not with drama, but with truth. "I didn't know that life belonged to Elijah Broderick. I didn't know he had once worn combat boots and carried bandages into war. I didn't know he'd ever needed saving himself. All I knew was that a man was dying and no one else was moving." Ahia's gaze swept the room slowly. "Sometimes we wait for someone else to act. Someone more qualified. Someone with more authority, more money, more certainty. But what if we stopped waiting? What if we moved imperfectly, urgently, toward the people in need?" A subtle nod from a woman at a back table, tears shining in her eyes. A man in a wheelchair leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests. Aaliyah felt their silent agreements, and it strengthened her resolve. "I used to believe that helping others was a luxury for people who already had stability. But what I've learned is that sometimes you have to save someone else to find the strength to save yourself. That's why I'm here. That's why the foundation exists." A few quiet claps began, soft and respectful, building as she closed. "We aren't just building scholarships, we're building bridges, between hopelessness and healing, between isolation and impact, between who we are and who we're meant to be. Thank you." The applause that followed was not thunderous, it was deeper than that, steady, resonant, grateful, the kind of applause that reaches the marrow. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and the last champagne glass was cleared, Aaliyah returned to her sanctuary, the Broderick Foundation headquarters on the 27th floor. It was after midnight, but the city still glittered below like a restless constellation. She stepped into the small office she'd been given, clean lines, open shelves, and a large framed photo on the desk, her and Elijah, taken 2 weeks before he passed, peacefully in his sleep. Hand resting lightly on hers, a smile that said everything words couldn't. Below it, inscribed in brushed gold, "You gave me breath, I gave you wings." She sat down slowly, the leather chair cradling her like it knew her weight. The room was quiet but not still. Purpose vibrated in the air here. Aaliyah reached for the stack of scholarship applications waiting on her desk, dozens of them. Young people balancing night shifts and lecture halls, caring for siblings while learning to care for strangers. She sifted through until one caught her eye. A handwritten letter, scrawled but sincere. "My name is Devin Morales. I'm a first-year EMT student. I sleep in a shelter downtown. I've never asked for help before, but I'm trying. I want to be someone who makes things better, even if it's just for one person. Please consider me." She set the letter down, her throat tight. She could see him. Not just his need, but his fire. That's who this was for, the ones who had everything against them and still showed up, still fought, still chose to help, just like she had. Outside, the wind brushed against the glass, whispering something she almost thought she could understand. Leah smiled softly, hands resting on the folder. Not everything broken stays broken. And sometimes, when you give everything you have to save someone else, the world finds a way to save you back. She looked up at the photo one last time. "Thank you, Elijah," she whispered. Then she turned back to the letter, picked up her pen, and began to write. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.